You're a very successful entrepreneur, a coach, and you've been working with CEOs across the world.
It's a $2 billion retail company here in the Middle East, and talking to their leadership team about this. They have 14,000 employees.
Was there any trigger point that you decided to start off?
You know what suffering you've had to go through.
According to different research studies, about 90% of the businesses fail within the first 5 years.
It was pretty devastating because that project would have set us up very well for the next year or so.
We see a lot of entrepreneurs struggling with anxiety, depression at times.
And anxiety, by definition, is a fear of the future. And so, we're constantly thinking ahead.
Did leadership come to you naturally?
No.
Or you had to struggle?
It wasn't a natural thing. I don't think it's natural to a lot of people, to a lot of us.
At what point would you say that you've created enough impact that you've actually achieved greatness? I'm super excited to share with you my very candid conversation with Gaj Ravichandra. Gaj is a renowned leadership coach, a psychologist, and co-founder of Compass Consultancy with over 20 years of experience. He's helped tens of thousands of leaders across various businesses and government institutions with their leadership capabilities. Get ready to be inspired as we explore Gaj's personal journey. Just a quick heads up before we start. What you're going to hear today will be completely unfiltered. It's going to change the way you think about business and leadership. So only continue to watch if you're ready for change. It's wonderful having you here, Gaj.
Thank you, Tariq. Good to be here.
Thank you so much. So I'd like to start off just taking you back to your childhood. And you've publicly said that you were fascinated with the idea of success. Not only that you wanted to become successful yourself, but you wanted to decode success. How far have you reached in your decoding of success?
I think it's an ongoing journey in that decoding process, but it's been a fascinating one, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I think growing up as a young immigrant child, I think one of the things that we were asked to do is to look out at the world and see the opportunity, right, that exists.
Yeah.
And when you're asked to do that, there are a few things that come back to you, right? One is, am I able to be a person one day that I can look back on my life and feel like I've achieved something of worth or value to me, that I've had a positive impact perhaps on other people around me, but also that there is this constant need to want to also fulfill other people's needs and desires as well, right, along that journey. And I think for me, the biggest lesson was understanding, how do I decode this for myself first?
Very interesting.
Because it starts with me, right? And if I can unpack that, how can I then help other people? And I think that was wrong. So what I learned was that to unpack myself, if I can unpack other people and help them to unpack, I might get some lessons for myself of immense value.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
So that was an interesting journey for me.
Now, we're talking about the age of maybe 10, 15 years of age. Now, the idea of success at that age and at this age, has it evolved or changed?
I remember when I was 13 years old, my parents gave me for my 13th birthday a framed picture of a Porsche 911.
Okay.
Right? For me, at 13 years of age as a young boy, that was success.
Wow.
That one day I might be able to have that car. Right?
Very interesting.
And I think over time, I realized that those are simply outcomes.
Correct.
Right? Things that you can achieve along the journey.
Correct.
And the success is really about falling in love with the day-to-day sort of opportunities that come up for you, right? The relationships that you come across, how you get to nurture those relationships. So I think for me, that was actually what it has morphed into. That success is not so much an external achievement, it is an internal achievement.
Okay. So that is the evolution that you've had in the last number of years. Great. So moving from the idea of having a 911 to achieving something internally and, contributing in the lives of others. Very, very fascinating stuff, I think. Now, if you can take us back again to your younger days, now you are a very successful entrepreneur, a coach, and you've been working with CEOs across the world, and you've helped a lot of organizations grow on their leadership level. Now, how did you think about setting up a business of your own?
It has been a decision I've been trying to make for a long time. I didn't have many reference points in my life around entrepreneurship. Right? I think, growing up as a immigrant child, there were the big four professions: engineering, medicine, law, accounting, right? And so anything outside of that, for me and my family, we didn't really know anything about that. So to choose psychology, for example, was a very foreign concept, right? And so that was already something I was breaking the mold on.
Interesting.
And then to go into entrepreneurship, where again, I didn't really know anybody that was a business owner that had grown a business. There was a lot of people that I needed to spend time with and to be mentored by.
Wow.
And so I think I got very lucky in my life, Tariq. I got exposed to a few people who were the owners of the businesses that I worked for that
Very
mentored me. And I think through that journey, I got to experience a few lessons that became almost areas of interest or passion, right, that I wanted to pursue in myself.
Interesting. Was there any trigger point that you decided to start off, about 11 years ago, I would say?
Yeah.
What was the trigger, if there was one?
Trigger point was, I think a few things had to fall into place. One was, realizing that I didn't have to do it by myself. I thought entrepreneurship was a decision that I had to make where I did it on my own, right? And I think I had to move away from that mindset to perhaps surrounding myself with people who had aligned values, who were then going to complement me and support me, and I was going to support them and complement them. So that was a huge burden that was lifted off my shoulders, that I didn't have to do this by myself, right?
Interesting.
The second part was actually the mentor was the CEO of the business that I worked for, actually telling me that I was wasting my potential working for somebody else. Now, no one has ever said that to me, and it was a very direct conversation. And I think I took that very seriously because I valued them. I looked up to that particular individual. Had been a very successful business leader, not just in Australia, but globally. And so I think that was something important. But also then having my wife, who was supporting me at the time, I think was very important, that I needed to have the go-ahead from her and buy-in from her, because there was not going to be an easy journey.
Very interesting.
How about yourself? What was the
very
sort of trigger for you?
I mean, trigger point for me was, of course, conversations with friends and just a sense of realization that there's a lot of potential in me that is untapped. And I wanted to explore myself. And, self-awareness was the key. Being aware, it was a point where I wanted to learn more. I wanted to explore more. I wanted to execute things on my own. I wanted to build a team. I wanted to, launch products.
Yes.
I wanted to bring a difference to the profession.
Yeah.
So this is where, I started thinking of, launching the first venture that we did about 10 years ago. So I think it was a kind of realization of that I had a lot of untapped potential. So that was the trigger point. And just connecting the dots here. Now, you mentioned that you had people who advised you or mentored you in terms of helping you understand about business. So I can relate to that. I mean, it's very important in my point of view to have mentors. Tell me more about your experience dealing with your mentors.
I've been very lucky that the mentors that I've had have really challenged me.
Okay.
And so I love the fact that I was always somebody who was very happy in my comfort zone, right? And so as a result of that, I was never really taking risks. I wasn't doing things outside of perhaps what I needed to do to learn and to grow at a faster pace. And so there was this confused state in my mind, which was, what is the difference between discomfort and safety? And so once I started to understand that the physiological reaction, your body reacts in a particular way when you are feeling uncomfortable, but also when you feel unsafe. So you start confusing these things, right? So I was thinking that entrepreneurship was an unsafe journey. It's almost like saying it's life and death, right? Something was going to happen.
Very interesting.
But what it is actually an uncomfortable journey, because you are constantly having to grow and learn, right?
Correct.
That is the discomfort. It is not unsafe. It is uncomfortable. Now, in my mind, what I had to do, Tariq, is to realize, firstly, that it's okay to be uncomfortable. If I accept the discomfort as an opportunity to grow, magic is going to happen.
And has it happened?
Well, for me, I feel like it has happened, right? I think we all have to be the magicians of our own lives, right?
Yeah.
And even when I think about magicians, right? To the magician themselves, it's not magic.
Yeah.
Because there's a blend of art and science, right? You have to practice, you have to experiment, you have to do something. Everyone else watching, it's like magic. Something illusionary is happening, right?
Very interesting.
But the entrepreneur themselves, as the magician, you know what suffering you've had to go through.
Correct.
You know the highs that you've had. You know the pain, right? You know the opportunities.
Correct.
But you also know this immense fulfillment, right, that you gain from that. And I think that is magic to me.
Correct. Now, just talking about the entrepreneurship here.
Yeah.
We've seen that a lot of the businesses, they start off, they fail. According to different research studies, about 90% of the businesses fail within the first 5 years. Of course, there are different statistics available, but roughly that's right, I guess. You have come through successful over the last 11 years or so. But I guess you would have tasted failure at some stage. And if you have, would you like to share, how you felt and what was that failure?
Yeah. So I think, even in the first couple of months, I remember when we set up our business, we had pitched for this piece of work with one of the Abu Dhabi entities. And so I remember it was a Thursday afternoon driving back from Abu Dhabi to Dubai and received the call from the HR director at the time. And I'd known this person, for a number of years. And they had said, look, hope you're going well. Just want to let you know that we're now at the final stage of the procurement process. You know that your proposal has been up against 18 other companies.
Wow.
We've narrowed that down to the top 3. You are in that top 3. But unfortunately, we cannot go forward, right, with your proposal. And there's a reason. The reason is I could not tick one box that meant that you were going to be selected.
Wow.
So I said, well, what was the box? And they said that you as a company don't have international experience.
Wow.
You as individuals have international experience, but you've just set up this company. It's 3 months old. You've been working in the UAE. You haven't really gone outside. So Tariq, when I received that call, you can imagine, I can't remember hearing much of the rest of the conversation, right? It was pretty devastating because that project would have set us up very well for the next year or so. I remember getting onto the phone after that call with our other business partners and we set up a meeting immediately when I got back to Dubai. And I remember saying very clearly to the other 2 business partners, guys, we are never, ever going to receive that call again. What do we need to do, right? Because we haven't achieved the success we wanted on that. What do we need to do now, right, to never get this? And out of that idea, out of that failure, that what I call a pivot moment in our business, came the opportunity for us to work with international business schools. Because if we worked with Harvard or INSEAD or London Business School, would a company ever turn us down? Would we not seem credible in their eyes? And that's what we did, right?
Wow.
And as a result of that, we have never been questioned on our credibility.
Wow.
And so, I think that in a word was failure. We failed to win that bid, right? But it was also a pivot for us in terms of how we looked at getting our business over the line.
Correct.
So that was interesting.
That's very, very interesting. I mean, I tend to say that a lot of the times that, failure is an inevitable part of your journey. And a lot of people are scared of failure. And you've talked about that in your other videos as well. I've
Failure
seen
means
that.
you're not trying, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I often say that if you're going to fail anyway, fail fast.
Yeah.
Because if you have 10 failures to reach your success, why not make those 10 failures faster so that you can reach a point where you can succeed? So I think it's a very, very valid point that you made, that learning from your failure is the key here. And I'm sure you would have been facing similar situations in different ways, even today, I guess.
Absolutely.
I face that all the time. When we launch new products or services, sometimes they fly, sometimes they don't. But what we do is we have learning.
Yes.
We have learning to do.
Yes.
And we execute that learning in other services or products that we launch. And then we succeed eventually.
Yeah.
So it's an absolute key. Now, we see a lot of entrepreneurs struggling with, let's say, anxiety, depression at times. I mean, I'd give you an example. This is, let's say we have a monthly target. The organization hits a monthly target, but still somehow we as entrepreneurs feel a lot of anxiety. Why is that? Have you felt that, first of all?
Oh, absolutely. And anxiety, by definition, is a fear of the future, right? And so as a result, we're constantly thinking ahead, right, as entrepreneurs about what does the future hold for us. The challenge with that is that there are many things out of our control, right, with the future. So if we want to actually help ourselves and to reduce the anxiety, one of the best ways to do that is to go back to ask yourself a very simple question. What is in my control? And when we focus on the things in our control, we then actually start to permeate well beyond that, right? We can then influence things that are happening that actually allow us to reduce our focus on the future.
Yeah.
We can't control the future, even though we would love to all control the future. Right?
Absolutely.
What we can control is what we do today, what our teams do today. And we can influence that in a positive way. So I think, for example, the wonderful growth you've had here, right, is a result of, yes, some element of worrying about things, but also thinking about what is in your control.
Correct.
Right, I'd imagine. And then doing those things.
Correct.
So reducing anxiety is important. But I think for me, it was a great reminder because I'm naturally a very anxious person. That is my natural personality style. So what I've had to relearn, if you like, is instead of focusing so much on the future, if I bring back my focus to today, that makes me feel a lot more comfortable, right, about where I am. And then I can do things from a better place, right? Yeah.
But can you really eliminate anxiety altogether?
I think
even if you execute the plan of action that you've just given.
I think the goal is not to eliminate anxiety. I think you need some anxiety.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I think it can be a very helpful motivator for people, particularly entrepreneurs. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it keeps us on our toes.
I think that's absolutely right.
Yeah. So I think it's how do we minimize the anxiety, or how do we make anxiety a powerful driver for us, right? And then shift our focus to the things in our control and influence.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Now, what keeps you awake at night? If there was one thing.
I do worry about the future for my kids. I think I don't spend as much time worrying about the business as I used to. I think I was very much
interesting.
Yeah. And I think part of that is going back to what's in my control, right? Because what keeps me up at night is normally the anxiety, right? It's the stress or the worry.
Yeah.
But I think if I go to bed at night knowing I've done what I needed to do today, that was in my control. Tomorrow's another day. And also having, and I think this sense of resilience, the idea that we can bounce back from problems. If you have bounced back many times, and I think this is where it's really important to have reference points, right? A history of doing things, knowing that it didn't work, then bouncing back. Doing things, not working, bouncing back, right? In your mind, you know that you have evidence that you are capable of overcoming these challenges. So whatever life throws at me tomorrow, I'm going to be able to overcome that. I'm sure you've had incidences of that you might go back to in your own mind, right, Tariq, and sort of use that?
Correct. Yeah, I mean, yes, I can relate to that, absolutely. Now, you have 2 children.
Yeah.
2 beautiful daughters.
Yep.
I've seen them on the social media, and it's amazing to see them growing up. And how would you define your relationship with your children as an entrepreneur, leading a very busy life?
I think for me, one of the things I learned a few years ago now was that it's less about the quantity of time that I have with them and more about the quality of the time. And it's about how I can provide a life for them where I feel that they can actually benefit, significantly by having certain touch points with me. For me, it was very important, and for my wife, that my wife wanted to be home, and she wanted to be there full time for them. And that was something that it's always a challenge, right? But it's always something that I want to make sure her dreams are fulfilled through that experience. So she has no regrets that she didn't do everything she could, for the children. In the same way, I should have no regrets that the things that I have done have benefited the children in some positive way. So if it's about the quality of the time that I have with them, how am I optimizing the time when I'm there? So I try and do things with them, try and be interactive with them where possible. We'll try and take our holidays. We'll try and make that time available. And I think for me, it was a very different experience to what it was in my expectations from, say, 10 years ago of what it meant to be a father as an entrepreneur, right? I don't judge myself based on that criteria or look at other people's lives and say, well, maybe I should be more like this, right? Because that is a different journey. Absolutely. It is a different experience, right?
Absolutely.
So are my touch points positive? Are they helping them?
Yeah.
And I find that more helpful. What about yourself? I mean, you've got 4 children.
Yeah.
How do you manage that with a busy work schedule and journey?
It's exactly the same. I think it's the quality of your time that you spend with your children that matters. And in my case, I mean, I've tried to sort of, we talk very openly. My children are very, very open with me. I openly allow disagreements. I openly allow them to debate on topics with me. So, we're not shying away ever about talking about something that is not very pleasant. I think it's the sense of openness and the quality time that I have with them that has developed a very strong relationship between me and my children and my wife, of course. So we are actually very, very closely knit family. It was hard, by the way. I'll just take you back a little bit. A few years back, I mean, I did find it hard to manage my time, to manage my relationship with my children. But, I reached a point where I had to educate myself. I had to become more aware of myself. Yeah. And I think that was the key. When I became aware of myself, I understood myself better. Then I could understood my children and, of course, my wife better. So, yeah, we are very, very close as a family.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think there's this wonderful thing. There's a concept in organizations called the leadership shadow.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What you say, what you do, what you prioritize, and what you reward should be all aligned.
Correct.
And I think even in our own families, what I say to my family, what I do with my family, what I prioritize with my family, and what I reward in my family, I think that is the shadow that my children see.
Yeah.
And what I need to make sure, and it's a constant reminder for me, is if they see me being happy and being fulfilled by the choices that I have made in my career, I can only wish that for them.
Yeah.
I can only wish that they would have that sense of fulfillment that I have in my life and that they can see it.
Correct.
Right? Coming to life. Yes, they may see that I'm tired sometimes. They may see that I'm upset over something. They may see that I'm having a disagreement, with suppliers or other people, right?
Yeah.
But then they also see the other side and the benefits, right?
Yeah.
And I think if that can be demonstrated to them through the role modeling, for me, that is a big part. That leadership shadow for me at home is also important.
Correct. Children do what you do, basically. They'll follow you, and it's you cannot hide yourself. It's absolutely true. So role modeling is absolutely the key for me as well. So let's take this discussion into a workspace now.
Yes.
Now we've talked about the sort of the beginning of your journey. We've talked about your family, the struggles, the failure, for example, that you've had to go through, and your thought process essentially. Now, how do you conduct your affairs with your employees? We call them colleagues here. What is your relationship with your people at your office?
So I would say most of our businesses, our business is really around associates. So we made a conscious decision actually in our practice to hire people who were experts at what they did, that were fantastic at what they did, but they were never permanently on the payroll.
Okay.
So they had complete freedom, right? Because the mindset of the kind of people that we're working with is that they want to be their own boss. They have their own brand and destiny that is tied to our brand and destiny. But that they were ultimately able to choose that. So we have 17 different associates, 18 different associates around the world that we work with on different projects. And one of the interesting things is that, for us, I'm probably one of the youngest, right, in that group.
Very
right?
interesting.
So that's kind of interesting for me.
Very inspiring, by the way.
Well, it's interesting for me because there's a bit of imposter, right, experience that comes in there to say, why would people listen to me about some of these things, right? And so I think it's that self-belief that you need to generate, that you are coming from a positive intention and place, right, to help you, which is helpful.
Interesting. So I'll take this discussion forward in the direction that you actually educate, you help leaders in terms of their career growth, in terms of you help them grow as leaders, essentially. Let's talk about yourself. How has your journey evolved as a leader over the years?
It's been a fantastic experience for me. I think I've learned so much. I continue to learn. I will continue to learn. Growth is actually the central pillar of my life. And so I think for me, reading is something that I wasn't necessarily very good at when I was younger. I used to learn a lot through osmosis. So watching other people, right? Even just being able to practice things that people would do was the best learner for me. Over the last few years, I've realized what immense value comes from reading, right? Now, reading is great because it gives you knowledge, but it doesn't give you wisdom.
Correct.
Wisdom is seeing it in action and learning from that, right? I think wisdom for me is a deep emotional, spiritual thing, right? Which you don't get from a book, right? You get knowledge from a book. So I think there's lots of people who read, but then what do you do with this knowledge, right? Are you actually applying it? Are you taking some risk? Are you doing things a little bit differently? For me, that's where wisdom comes in. And I genuinely am attracted to people who have that wisdom, who are wise, right? But they've done something. They've gone and taken a chance. They've backed themselves or backed another person, all right? Backed an idea, right? And I think for me, that's been very powerful.
Interesting. So did leadership come to you naturally? No. Or you had to struggle?
It wasn't a natural thing. I don't think it's natural to a lot of people, to a lot of us. I think there are elements, right, where you can find that. I think for me, the biggest thing has been around, do I believe in myself first? That has been a journey, all right?
Yeah.
The second thing is then, if I believe in myself, right, can I still participate in someone else's journey, right, and support that person through their journey? And that also helps me, right, on my journey. I mean, I learn so much from my coachees. Every day I'm constantly learning from them.
Absolutely.
I'm working with people who have built, multi-billion-dollar companies, right? Now, I might be helping them from a mindset perspective, but they help me so much from a business perspective. The lessons that I learned from them are amazing, right? The nuggets of information that are not found in a book, right? They're found through decades of experience.
That's right. Yeah.
And so I think for that, I feel very enriched and lucky in my life. I'm very fortunate to have that.
What were your struggles as a leader? I mean, what are the things that you really, really struggled and you might have felt that, it's not for you? Was there a point?
Yeah, there's always been points, right? I think confidence is a big factor, right? I think the fact that I'm doing this without guardrails, right? I'm making things up as I go, right? In lots of ways, has been something that I've had to grapple with. I think making sure that I realize that surrounding myself with the right people is super important, right? And I think there's this element of surrounding myself with people who have these three factors: loyal, competent, and also can be stretched. Now, when you find people who have all three, it is like magic.
True.
Right?
Absolutely
Sometimes
true.
we'll find people, I'm sure you've got people, you've come across individuals, right? That perhaps they're very loyal and they're competent at a certain level. They've maybe hit a limit, but you can't stretch them beyond a certain limit, right? When you find all three, Tariq, that is, as an entrepreneur, you want to hold, they're like liquid gold. You want to hold on to them.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah?
Absolutely.
How do you do that? How do you sort of manage that?
It's, for me, it's all about the vision and the values, essentially. Now, we have a thought process where, our people are the most important entities within the organization. Our vision is to create success stories. And, it starts with our people. And the way I look at it is that, I try and make sure that if anyone is going to be a success story here, it must be our people first.
Absolutely.
And with that comes loyalty. With that comes, increased competence levels. With that comes everything that the organization needs, because it's a win-win situation. For me, succeeding is not about me. It's about our people.
Yeah.
First of all,
that is super important. That was one of the big lessons for me on the entrepreneurial journey. It was an old mentor who told me, the moment you put yourself not at the center, where you put your idea or the vision or the mission at the center,
correct,
then the magic happens.
Correct.
Right? And I think that part for me is you're moving yourself out of that scene. Correct. All of a sudden for you, it's like your people, it could be your mission, your vision. Correct. Then it becomes something real, right?
It is absolutely real. So that's how we place emphasis on our people's development, for example, and their success. Now, talking about leadership development, which is your forte. I have experienced myself that people go to conferences, people go to leadership seminars, they come back. And they forget about everything. The next day, we've got something in-house that we try and implement. I'm deeply engaged in that. I'm not a big fan of, sending people to conferences. Maybe they can develop connections. They can learn something from the general environment. But the actual lesson of leadership that they go to learn, for example, they don't tend to learn that somehow. Yeah. Do you relate to that?
Massively. We run leadership workshops and training programs and coaching and so forth. One of the big lessons that I've learned is that if we don't have something that is sticky at the end of those sessions or during those sessions that people go and actually create a habit out of, it's a waste of money. Right? So for example, if you go and do a leadership program and you don't walk out of that leadership program with a sense of or a belief that I am a leader, right? You are not going to put things into practice because your identity is tied to how you behave. Yeah. Right? If I believe that I'm a healthy person, when I look at that donut, right, I might choose not to eat that donut. Yeah. Because I am a healthy person. Yeah. That's my identity. That's my belief, right? So my thoughts affect my feelings. My feelings affect my behavior. So the way that I feel about something determines how I behave. So if I don't walk out of that leadership training believing that I'm a leader, I have something to contribute to the leadership journey of other people and myself, the habits that are required are not going to happen.
Correct.
Right? So that identity piece is really important. And we need to instill that, right? And if you haven't got that, it's going to be an uphill battle.
Yeah, that's where I struggle with a lot of people. I mean, changing those habits is not easy. We've seen a lot of books written about habit loops and what have you. But, I find amazing to see that people can't even build habit of exercising, for example, on a regular basis, or eating healthy for that matter. I think it's, as you've talked about it earlier as well, it's the mindset. It's the mindset that determines whether you have that belief or not.
Yeah.
If you have that mindset, then you can slowly start learning and working towards building those habits.
Yeah.
And becoming a leader. Now, there are different hierarchies of leadership. I'm sure you would have read that in Good to Great by Jim Collins, and it's my favorite book, by the way, on business. He talks about 5 levels of leadership. The 5th level is the highest form, where he is talking about the great companies that he studied. All the leaders in those companies were level 5. People with humility and a lot of determination. Humility is not common, by the way.
Yes.
We do tend to see a lot of leaders who have charisma, who have a lot of knowledge to pass on. They can develop other leaders, but humility is missing, and that's where I think the key is. What are your thoughts?
One of my favorite words from last year was the word ambition. Humble ambition.
Yeah.
The idea that you can have humility, but at the same time be ruthlessly ambitious for yourself and the business that you work for. Right? Having your feet on the ground, but at the same time aiming for the stars. Right? And I think for me, that is a wonderful mindset, to have as a leader, that you do have to be demonstrating and role modeling, that kind of behavior. It's interesting when you look back on history, some of the greatest leaders, right, were not humble people. Right. So when you think about Steve Jobs, you think about Bill Gates, you think about Napoleon, you think about certain individuals that we revere and we look at, and we books and movies and so forth have been made about them. It's not necessarily the humility, even though I personally love humility because I think it's a wonderful quality, but that is a quality that I personally enjoy. Right. But what they did have was that their ambition compensated for their lack of humility that they might have had, right? Now, I don't agree that is necessarily a very healthy way of managing or leading a business, right? However, there is history that tells us that you can have, some wonderful outcomes that come from this. It may not be a lovely journey for people, right, along that path,
Correct.
Which I think is slightly different, right? I think it's a point that you're trying to make, right? That what is the experience also for the other people around you, right, through that process?
I think we're on the same page. When it comes to humility as described or explained in the book, it's not about being humble. It's about your commitment to the cause, right? You are not bigger than the cause.
Yes.
You're out of the way. Essentially, your cause is the biggest part. I think that's where Jim Collins is talking about the humility. These leaders of the great companies that he studied had humility and the ambition for the cause.
Absolutely. So if you look at Satya Nadella versus Bill Gates, completely different leadership approach, right? The way that Satya talks about his people, the way that he prioritizes them is amazing. And you've seen that reflected also in the share price, right? From a financial perspective. So there are lots of ways of being able to do that now where I think it's become more perhaps acceptable and transparent in how we do lead effectively.
Correct. So in your leadership programs, what kind of leaders do you come across? What is the world made of? I just want to learn. What is the common pattern out there? Do you see a lot of people who have this quality of humility? Do you see level 3 leaders? Do you see level 4 leaders? What kind of leaders you come across, and how have they changed after your workshops, or in general? You must have been in touch with them after your workshop. If you've seen any changes, and what changes have you seen?
So I think the biggest thing for us during the workshops and particularly the coaching, that we undertake, is a word that you've been mentioning a few times now, is about this awareness. right? So the more that we become aware of ourselves and who we are as a person, because who we are is how we lead.
Correct.
Right? So if we understand who we are, then we have a better chance of understanding the impact of our leadership and how we choose to lead. And so I think for us, our workshops and our coaching is very much about getting that person very clear about who they are. Now, that might mean that they need to confront certain things about their personality. For example, our insecurities, right? The things that have made us feel unsafe at some point in our lives. And as a result of that, we've had to tell ourselves a story. That story has served us, right? It's managed to get us into leadership positions or into entrepreneurial positions, whatever it might be. But at some point, it starts to disserve us, right? Maybe it's not taking our journey any further. Maybe we've hit a ceiling in where our business is going, right? And, as a result of that, we need to address those things. So for me, self-awareness, that understanding of oneself is important.
That's the absolute key.
That is key, right? So I think if we get onto that, that is the first thing. The second thing is then saying, what am I willing to take ownership of on that, right? Am I willing to create a safe environment, a psychologically safe environment, right? Because the performance of my team is limited by how safe they feel, right? It is like a ceiling that we cannot see. And so the safer that our people feel in the business, the higher the performance. Right?
Wow.
And so as a leader, am I aware even of how safe my people are? Can they speak their mind without feeling punished or humiliated, right, for things? Because if they feel that way, they may not say things. This was recently, I was at a retail company. It's a $2 billion retail company here in the Middle East, and talking to their leadership team about this. They have 14,000 employees, right? And the leadership team, I asked one simple question. I said, how many of you here today, right, didn't say something in the last 1 month, even though you knew that if you said it, that it was going to be in the best interests of the business, right? Everyone put their hand up, right? There's one thing at least, right, that they wanted to have said, maybe they could have said, but they felt they were something was going to not happen well as a result of that, right? I said, right, times that by 14,000. Imagine the cascading impact
Huge.
that it has.
Absolutely
Say 1% of those ideas was actually going to be helpful. Just 1%.
Yeah.
That means you would have had 140 ideas that have now disappeared, right?
Wow.
This is the impact that we have on our business every day and we don't realize.
Great example, by the way. Great example. Let's talk about organizational culture. I'm sure you would talk about that in your workshops as well, because that goes in hand in hand with the leadership at the top. Now, we have gone through a transition in terms of our culture. I mean, we have had our values written down very clearly, and then we've been emphasizing on a certain culture. But when it comes to the actual execution, it becomes difficult at times, because when we grow as an organization, we have different people coming in. They have different value system, different thought process. Although we try and bring in people only who share our values, but you end up having realistically speaking, different people with different backgrounds, and it becomes quite challenging to develop a culture. What is your experience in terms of cultural development in organizations?
So the way that I tend to look at this, Tariq, is I look at organizational culture as the broader societal culture. So imagine your organization is a society, right? And a society's culture is very much based on stories, right? And in those stories lie the values, right, that have been held throughout. So what are the stories in our organization that we talk about, right? And sometimes it could be the first big project that we won, right, as a company, and what did that mean for us? Right? The big failure that we might have had, right? Maybe a merger or an acquisition, that changed the destiny of our business. A big investor, that came in, right? There's different things that are stories, right? So are the stories clear? Do people talk about those stories, right, within the organization? Do we share them? So stories create an emotional belief. Right? Because they trigger emotions, right? But the emotions also come from our thoughts, what we're thinking. So do people believe that they are part of this in-group, if we call it? If you look at social psychology, we have a thing called in-group and out-group, right? So for an organizational culture, they need to believe we are part of one in-group, right?
Yeah.
And that in-group has a collective identity, right?
True.
The impact on me has an impact on you, right? And as a result of that, I will fight for you and support you, right? Because we are actually one collective group, right? And so that I find fascinating, right? That we can create that environment where we see each other as more similar than different, right? So do we actually talk about that openly within the organization? A lot of companies will put values up on the walls.
Yes.
And the research tells us, right, that has a 5% impact on creating the culture of the organization. 70% impact on culture is based on what is happening every day.
The living part.
Living part, right?
Yeah.
So what are we doing? Amazon used to do this beautifully, right? In the early days of Amazon, Jeff used to have this idea, Jeff Bezos. He'd start the meeting by citing the mission statement or vision statement. Any meeting that was held that didn't align to helping that vision was immediately canceled.
That is amazing.
Right?
Absolutely amazing.
So imagine that in every meeting, right? It is becoming entrenched into everything that you do.
Yeah.
And so it creates a way of thinking.
Yeah.
Repeated thoughts are beliefs.
Correct.
And that helps you to make decisions.
And actions.
Yes. Right? And so that cycle is just a beautiful cycle that we can control, right? Through that storytelling and that process.
Absolutely. So now talking about mission and vision, these are the key components of any organization. They are very foundational in nature. In your experience, what is the best way to actually inculcate the mission and vision into the day-to-day living part of an organization?
For me, so a stories obviously are very important, right? As part of that, but I think it's also about how do we share those moments, with people?
Yeah.
And so, do we make town halls available, right, to people? Do we also get top down and bottom up, happening across the business, right, which is important?
Yeah.
That sort of voice of the people, type opportunities.
Yes.
I think that is super important, right? For us as well. But also, the reason why vision and mission are so critical is that everyone needs to know, why am I here? Right? What is the purpose of my experience?
Correct.
Yeah? And what am I going to get from this experience? Right?
Correct.
So if people come to work and they don't know what the benefit to them is by achieving this vision or mission, it becomes less meaningful to them.
Correct.
So their story needs to get connected to the organization story.
That's where the magic happens.
There has to be a bridge.
Correct.
Right? And if that bridge is not there, then you get disengaged employees. We're looking at the statistics now globally, right? 80% of employees are disengaged, right?
Absolutely.
Why are they so disengaged? What is happening here in companies that are so dysfunctional? The way that they are built right now, a lot of them are dysfunctional, right?
Correct.
Because they haven't built that bridge, right? To demonstrate that connection. So why would I choose to work here? Right? Well, what is the reason? Am I just coming here for my paycheck, once a month? Right? So that means, and we know that if people understand their vision and the mission of the business, they will work harder.
Correct.
Right? When it connects to themselves, there's an intrinsic value for them.
Correct.
So this is why it is so important, but also the restating of those vision and mission elements to the person. Right? Yeah. Sometimes we think as leaders, my vision and mission is really clear, but I don't understand why we're not achieving our numbers, right? Well, how does that connect to the person doing the job?
Yeah.
Right? What is that story?
Correct. And I guess that's the job of a leader.
Correct.
To make that connection happen. And to what extent you can make that happen is the very extent that you will succeed as an organization, I believe. Great. Now, values.
Yes.
Now, of course, mission and vision are very foundational, but values go hand in hand. What are your thoughts on corporate or core values in a company?
Well, I guess if we look at how we get to see values, right? Values are behaviors manifested.
Correct.
So values help us because they can guide the behaviors that we want to see in an organization. But they're simply guiding principles.
Correct.
Right? And so if we assume that they are guiding principles, then everything we do is based around, those behaviors. That's a wonderful element, right? But we should also be willing to challenge those things, right? So for example, our process, right? So, we value systems, right? And efficiency, right? Well, what if that is an important value, right, for some organizations, but what if that gets in the way of our employees being happy?
Wow.
What if it gets in the way of our customers experiencing different products and services, right? Because we're so interested in streamlining everything and making things so efficient, right? So sometimes our values can get in the way of our business.
Very interesting.
So we need to question that, right? And we need to challenge it. And we need to create a safe environment as a leader where that is okay, right? And so I think values are a guiding philosophy. That is all they are. Once we say to them, but you breached the values, right? When you say to somebody that happens, it's automatically taken as antagonistic, right? That it is a negative thing. Why is it negative? Because we're stretching something, we're pushing something, right? And there's a difference between values and the law, right? We shouldn't be breaking the law. That is a governmental thing that is passed down to us. Everything else, we can push the boundary, see what's happening, right? How do we know how far we can push something if we don't push, right? We need to push, right? Even, for example, someone might say innovation is a deep value, right?
Wow.
That we hold in an organization, right? Well,
very wishful.
yeah. Well, what does that mean, right? Because for one person, innovation is, I'm going to try something new every year. One thing. Yeah. That's innovation, right?
Correct.
But it's a guiding principle. It's a mindset, right? Of taking risk.
Correct.
Right? Of trying things differently.
Correct.
Right? So I think it can be helpful from that perspective.
Very interesting. Now, of course, they are guiding principles. Yeah. Of course, they need to be sort of, looked at to sort of, guide your behavior. Can you adopt someone else's values?
I think you can acknowledge somebody else's values, right? Whether you accept them or adopt them is a slightly different point. This happens in relationships, in marriage, for example, right? You may have some similar values in a relationship or with your boss in a work context, right? Yeah. You don't have to agree with all of them, right? You can just have an awareness or an appreciation or an acknowledgement that this is what is important to Tariq, right? It may not 100% align to what I feel is important, but I understand where he's coming from and why it is going to help the business, right? And so the values, it tells me these are Tariq's guiding principles, how he operates his life, how he chooses, to operate, right? But maybe as Gaj, mine are slightly different, right? I might have some overlapping ones, of course, but I might have some others, right, that are slightly different. Do we have an awareness of what that is? Yeah. Do we acknowledge that we're going to have difference? And what does that mean then for our relationship?
Interesting. Well, that's very, very good conclusion to this point. Now, moving on to the coaching part.
Yes.
Of course, you coach leaders, business leaders, CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs. I was looking at one of your videos and I was trying to understand the difference between coaching and mentorship.
Yes.
What is it?
I get into a lot of trouble with this question, Tariq, because I think my view on coaching has changed over the years. There are different institutions around the world or federations of coaching that have a particular way of looking at coaching. I think the best coaches that we've ever had in the world, right? If you look over the decades of coaching, do both. They do both coaching and mentoring. So they not only ask questions and challenge people to think differently, which is what the traditional view of coaching is, but they're also able to step in and provide frameworks and guidance and information and support, right, as well. And so I think, those, if you think about, coaching even from a sports perspective, the best sports coaches, man, you're an elite corporate athlete. Right? If you imagine you taking the athletic mindset, right, from the sporting field into the corporate world, you're a corporate athlete. And the best coaches that I've seen come from the sporting world, right? They've been able to help people to realize their true value, right? And to do that, they will challenge them in how they think and do things, but they'll also provide guidance and mentorship at the same time.
Yeah.
So even me and my business partners will sometimes disagree on this topic, right? But I think we are evolving as a discipline in coaching to incorporating both. I think the best coaches are the ones that can do both.
Very interesting.
If you like, you get two value for money, right? In terms of bringing them together.
So you coach leaders. Do you have a coach for yourself?
Absolutely. I've got 2 mentors that I spend regular time with. I have a coach and I have a therapist as well. As being a psychologist, part of the process is that you should have a therapist as well, right? That works with you. Because we hear lots of things. We have to process, different kinds of information. I hold many secrets, obviously, from the people that I speak with. And that needs to, be, processed in some healthy way, right? And so I have many people around me. And I think, if you think about even the world's best at what they do, Roger Federer, or other people in the past, right? They've had 5, 6, 7 coaches in different areas of their life that they need to keep them going, right? To push them, right?
Absolutely.
And I think if you can find some good people.
That is an absolute key. I wouldn't be able to function without mentors. I wouldn't be able to function. It's a blessing, actually, to have a right coach or a mentor or, 2 in 1, essentially. It's an absolute key. And I'd be amazed if, the most successful people or business leaders across the world do not have mentors or coaches. This is an absolute key. And the way I've felt is over the years, it becomes really lonely at times. The way you rise in your career or in business, it becomes very hard for you to communicate with people at a certain level, to share your thought process.
Yes.
And it is in those times that it becomes very important that you have people close to you who share your tough times and get advice from.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is an absolute key. Great. So let's talk about work-life balance. We see a lot of stuff on social media, LinkedIn, for example. There are so many posts talking about work-life balance. I don't believe in it. Do you?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a corporate myth, right? And I think, we have to separate sometimes these things, right? So I think when you are working for yourself as an entrepreneur, or whether you're working in the corporate, sort of situation or environment, there is life. And you have to find balance for your life. What that balance looks like is different to every person.
Correct.
So for me to apply a general rule, right, around what are the key disciplines of work-life balance. In fact, I've never seen, in the traditional sense, any high performer in any discipline that has had so-called work-life balance. I've never met them.
True.
I don't think they even exist, right?
True.
Because to be great at something requires immense effort, right? That needs to go into a discipline in anything, whether it's sport, business. I mean, we've all seen this, right, in our own lives. So therefore, what is the balance that you choose for your life? Work is one part of that, right? Your family is another part of that.
Correct.
Your friends are another part of that. Your mentors are another part of that, right? So I agree with you that I think that work-life balance, it is a story that has been created that is a very different story for each person.
Correct.
And rather than talking about work and life separately, let's talk about life. And work is part of your life.
True,
right?
true. Yeah, to me, a lot of people talk about it as if there's something wrong with work. It's something that needs to be hated and gotten rid of. It's an amazing misconception in my view, in my understanding. And I really think that the idea is misplaced. If you were to use the correct words, I think it should be a work-life blend or harmony, I would say. To me, life is like a song And in order to play your song, for example, if you play piano, you have to press all the keys or the notes at the right times for you to be able to enjoy and play that song.
Yeah.
And in that piano, for example, you have your work as one of the keys. You might have your prayer, for example. You might have your exercise. You have your nutrition. You have your wife. You have your children. You have your friends. You have
Absolutely.
what have you. There's so many things that there are in life, and you can't just compare them with work.
Yeah.
Everything is important in their own right. It's your skill now, how you play that song of your life on the piano of your life. So you have to press all the keys at the right time, in the right, let's say, tone or pressure to be able to play that song and enjoy that song.
And I think it's a really interesting one. And I love this with entrepreneurs, right? The idea that sometimes, and this is what I hear from entrepreneurs as we're talking about things, that we sometimes confuse our mission and vision for our employees' vision and mission, right? Sometimes I'll hear entrepreneurs tell me, why isn't that person working so hard? They want to check out at 5 o'clock, right?
Yeah.
Don't they know we've got so much we need to do?
Yeah.
Right? Well, that's your vision and mission.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
It is not theirs, right? So therefore, we can't simply transpose what we think is important onto our employees.
Correct.
Now, if they were the owner, they were the entrepreneur, they might look at things a little bit different.
Yeah.
But they've chosen to be an employee. That is their life journey. That's their path at the moment. Right? They might become an entrepreneur later on if they choose to, or they might continue to be an employee all their lives. Right? That's their journey.
Correct.
Right? But simply by pushing our agenda as an entrepreneur onto our employees is also not fair.
Correct.
And we need to be aware, I think, sometimes
Absolutely,
of that. Right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
But one thing I would add to this is that, professional growth is something that I personally tend to really focus on. Even if you are working in an organization, your growth is linked to your effort.
Yes.
How much learning and development you are actually going through in order to grow yourself within the same job, for example, or within the same organization.
Yeah.
I think there's a sense of duty on everyone. But of course, you're absolutely right in terms of the vision of an entrepreneur and the vision of an employee, for example. They don't often match. But I think it's a duty on everyone to actually learn and grow as individual.
Yeah. So that is a value for me that I hold very close.
Yeah.
But it may not be a value for other people.
Wow.
I've met many people
Yeah.
who do not have the value of growth.
Yeah.
What they want to do is they want to turn up to work, they want to do a good job, and they want to go home. Now, sometimes we need 60% of our company to be like that.
That is very interesting.
Right?
Yes.
They come and operationally deliver on what they need to do. Operationally excellent.
Yeah.
Right? Loyal, competent.
Yeah.
But we ask them to stretch and grow.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't want to do that. Maybe that's not even important to them.
Very interesting.
And so that's an example,
Very
right, where
interesting.
I might impose my own values, right, onto another group of people, thinking, doesn't everyone want to grow? Right? I thought that was normal. And I come from that mindset, right? There's so much beauty and richness in the world by growing, but that is my perspective.
But what if you need a person in a certain position to grow for the sake of the job itself?
So that is slightly different. So that's the job. The job requires somebody with this mindset and values.
Yes.
Right? So we need to bring those people in, right, that have that kind of mindset,
Yeah.
similar values, those kind of things.
Correct.
Right? And I think, if we have somebody in that job who perhaps isn't growing, but we know the job requires that of them, maybe we can move them to somewhere else in the organization, right?
Yeah.
Maybe the job is not being fulfilled because we don't have the right person there, right, with the right value. So,
Very
that's an
interesting.
important.
Very interesting. I agree with you. It's then moving the people around and trying to make sure that everyone is happy
optimized
with their own vision.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now, the subject of greatness.
Yes.
I've seen your profile on the internet, and you've talked about studying success, decoding success, and ultimately holding mindset, being responsible for this, for any success to be achieved. You've also talked about greatness. What is greatness to you?
Greatness to me is both an internal and an external position. So what do I mean by that? Greatness can be judged by societies, communities, right? To say you are great, you've achieved something great of immense value, right? But also within yourself, you can decide that what you are doing is of great value, right? And I would argue that even sometimes what you say to yourself is much more important than what other people say to you. You might hear constantly around you that you're great, but inside you feel like a failure, right? And I think that's that sense of how do you reconcile these two things, right? Because sometimes there are people who think they're great, but actually are not doing anything of any value, right? So you do find these kind of different combinations, right, that is taking place. I think reconciling these two worlds, the internal world with the external world, is really important. And I think for me, this comes down to impact, right? What is the impact that I choose to have, right? What is the problems that I'm trying to solve, right? And I think when you can do that and you create momentum and energy, right, along that path, that is great. Right? It is something amazing. You can build something and grow something, right? And so one of the big distinctions that I sort of realized when I was studying psychology, it was probably like second year, neuroscience, I think in particular, was this idea that the brain and the mind are different, right? The brain is there to help you survive, but the mind is there to help you thrive.
Correct.
So the brain has a basic functioning of keeping you alive. That's the entire job of a brain, right? But the mind is if you like, your software. Right. I talk about hardware and software. Correct. Your brain is your hardware. Your software is your mind. You are given an opportunity every day to upgrade your mind. And it's a bit like those, do you have like an iPhone or a Samsung or something? You have to update, you get these updates, right?
Correct.
And you have to update, right? Now, every day you get a choice. Do I choose accept on the upgrade or do I choose reject on the upgrade? Right? Yes. For me, the people who are great choose accept.
Correct.
Right? They choose accept more than they choose reject. And that is what propels them into a completely different stratosphere of outcomes. Right? Because they realize that they're not operating from the brain in survival mode. They're operating in thrive mode. They see something that other people cannot see. Right? There's opportunity, potential, mission, vision, whatever it might be, right?
Interesting. Now, it's the impact. If you were to put it in another word, right? Impact. Now, at what point would you say that you've created enough impact that you've actually achieved greatness?
So again, this is the reconciliation of the internal, external. What is great to one person is mediocre to another.
Very interesting.
Right? So depending on the environment you're in, right? So I've got, family and friends, for example, who worked at very high-performing investment banks, global investment banks. They're used to working 14 hours a day, right? So high performance is the norm, right? Then they go and work in industry somewhere, right? And then they go and realize people come here 9 to 5. If I work 9 to 6, I am considered great in what I do, right?
Great,
So this environmental difference, right? But if I was to work 9 to 6 in the investment bank, I'm seen as a low performer, right? Even if I might impact things in a positive sense, right? And so I think there is this, what is the environment that I'm in that is contributing to this idea of the outcome or the impact that I'm achieving? The people around me, right? That also influences, right, what is going on. And then finally, what am I telling myself in my mind, right? Do I believe in what I'm achieving? Do I believe it's important to wake up in the morning, not have to hit the snooze button on Monday morning, right, to come into work and have the Monday blues, right? Do I believe this? I mean, I can't remember the last time. I mean, look, for me, this is 11 years right now in this company. This is the only time in my life I've had the same job for 11 years. Right? As, co-founder, managing partner, whatever the title might be. But I've never looked at my days
Yeah.
as something I don't look forward to. I might be anxious,
Yeah.
right, about something,
Yeah.
right? But I don't look at it and say, oh, I don't really want to get to work today because I feel in control of my destiny.
Yeah.
Now, you don't have to be an entrepreneur to feel that way.
Yeah.
You can actually choose to be feeling that way, even as an employee. That is simply a mindset choice.
Yeah.
Right? When I say simply, it's not simple, right? But it is a process that you can train your mind to believe, right, and work on.
What is your destiny, since you've mentioned destiny?
I don't believe I'm in control of my destiny. I think destiny is something well and truly out in the future, right? What I do want to do is to help people grow. That is my path, right? And I think if I can ensure that I do that every day, that is a wonderful contribution. It is a wonderful habit that I can then continue to work on. That helps me to grow, right, through that process. As long as I'm growing intentionally through that process, I think that is my destiny, right? To help others grow and to help me grow. Everything else I cannot control, right? I don't know what the outcome is going to be, right?
Correct.
But what about yours? Do you think about it from that perspective?
It's for me, it's finding my true potential and creating that impact on the lives of others. That's the most important thing for me. It's a work in progress. I'm exploring myself more and more every day by reading, by understanding myself more and more. I think, it's a work in progress, and the level of impact is what will determine how far I have achieved my vision in life, which is also to create essentially success stories for our people, for our stakeholders.
Fantastic.
That's the most important thing for me. For me, I mean, it's really about our people. I really, really think hard about our people. I think we are in the business of making people successful.
Yes.
Be it our people, be it our clients, the entrepreneurs who are, for example, setting up their businesses with us. It's ultimately them. They are looking to start and then grow and make sure that they have sustainable businesses. So making them successul is the key here. And hence this podcast, for example, is to educate them, educate our people. And educating them through practical live examples of people like yourselves. So final question, actually, I have two questions, not the final one. What is the vision of Compass, and where do you want to see it go henceforth?
Yeah. So our tagline is inspiring your discovery. Right? And I think for us, a lot of the work we do is around either delivering coaching or helping people become coaches. These are the two parts of our business. So the more that we can do that, not just, we work across 5 continents at the moment, but I'd like to really embed that much more deeply into the work we do. I think we need to become, much more embedded in products that take a lot of the learnings that we've got and actually employ that and pass that on to people. I think that's really important. And I think the more presence, a physical presence that we can have to support people, I think would be super powerful. So I think the vision is around inspiring people to discover that, and that's that growth journey, but doing it around the world, impacting people in both individual and group, type environments. That helps ultimately, each individual, but also helps companies. It helps teams. It helps families, right, to become their best. I can't tell you how many times, Tariq, in conversations, in workshops, in sessions, the things that people will take away and apply into their own families at home, right? That is deeply meaningful for us as a business, right? That it's not just a corporate, kind of influence. It is a societal influence, right? For me, that is powerful.
This is really, really amazing stuff. I mean, making a difference in the lives of others. This is an amazing, amazing career path to have, or a business to have.
Yeah, I feel very, very lucky, very fortunate to be able to do this. So, touch wood, we can do this for as long as we can.
Great going. I'm sure you'll go places and, many, many more, successful years ahead of you, inshallah.
Thank you.
the final question.
Yeah.
Any message that you'd like to pass on to our viewers today?
That entrepreneurial journey, whether you are working, setting up your own business, running your own company, or working inside an organization, the entrepreneur, if you like, right? The first step is really knowing yourself.
Correct.
And having that self-awareness and understanding.
Starting point, really.
So knowing yourself has to be something that I think all of us should work on, because we don't live in a vacuum. Every decision we make and the actions we take impact those around us. So I think even understanding what is the impact that I have on the people around me, let alone myself, is important. This idea of growth for me, in whatever form that takes, some will grow at a faster pace, some slower. I think it is a wonderful human condition to be aligned to something that is bigger than us, right? But also to feel like you are growing. And
Absolutely.
so, I think that journey is a very important one as well. So the self-awareness and understanding and that growth, I think if we can continue that or create habits around doing those things,
absolutely,
that is a wonderful success.
Absolutely. So self-awareness is the ultimate key as a starting point.
As a starting point, yeah.
And then continuous learning and development, essentially. And then execution, action on top of that would make things happen. So that is a great message to end this conversation. And of course, we'll have many more conversations after this.
Yes.
It's a great pleasure having you, Gaj. We've learned a lot today. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And I think, what you're aiming to achieve through this, sharing these stories, and it's amazing that your tagline is around success stories, right? I think the stories hold a key into not just individuals, but entire groups of people.
Absolutely.
Right? Learning and growing and developing. And I think that's a very powerful mechanism to use. So thank you.
Very encouraging, Gaj. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thank you.